the conference.
Yeah, so, and I am recording the conference. I just pressed record right now. So just everyone on their best behavior. But this is an awesome class, by the way. So this is a 6th grade language arts class. These are IB students, by the way. They're part of our magnet program here at Jackson Middle School. So they've chosen to come to Jackson, which is awesome. All right, and I'm entering Miss Russo, our principal. So welcome, Miss Russo, if you can hear us. So I'm going to pass the mic to Nellie, and I'm going to get off the air.
Okay. And we already presented the moderators. Miss Esteville, the coach, is here. Miss Newsom, it's here, and if she's not here, she will be here in a couple of minutes. And Miss Russo just got into the conference. Miss Russo is the principal of Jackson, and we're set to go. Annette, if you can pass the next slide. Okay, Miss Garret Weyr, she is a novelist and teacher whose 8 books have been banned, translated into multiple of languages, and included in college curricula. She is the Prince Honor Award recipient, and her short stories have been published in many prestigious journals. She has taught literature and creative writing at college and MFA programs. She has a Master in Fine Arts from New York University. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. Tisch?
Yes.
School of Arts. Okay. And she is native from New York City, but now live with her cat and her dog in Venice, California. She says that she reads too much, although we all know that there is not such thing as reading too much. Without further ado, I present Miss Weyr.
Hi, you guys. Thank you so much for having me. When your teacher reached out to me and said you guys were going to do writing next quarter, I said I would be happy to talk about writing, but I thought I'd seen a lot of questions. And I see that some of you are curious about band, and I'll start by answering that generally, and then I want to take some questions about writing, and I will talk a little about writing because you have to do that next. A book is banned when people don't want it in the library or in stores, and Dragons wasn't banned. Sorry, this Language of Spells, it used to be called The Poet's Daughter, and I refer to it in my mind as the book about dragons. So a book is banned if people don't think it's got good content. And I wrote a book in, oh God, before you guys were born, about a girl who falls in love with a boy who is her brother's boyfriend. And it's set in New York City, and a lot of parents in different parts of the country got very upset and banned it. So that's what banned means. I saw one of you, and I apologize, I don't remember which one of you asked how long it took me to write this book. And I would say this book took me an unusually long time. It took me about 5 years. And it's partly because one of the main things I want you guys to think about. Okay, Chloe, will you remind me when I'm done talking about an intro to writing that you have a question? And I will absolutely answer it. One of the most important things you have to answer when you write anything is, what is the point of view? And the point of view is who is telling the story. And sometimes it can just be a mysterious narrator, but sometimes it's a first person, like I versus we versus you versus he is point of view. Who's telling the story? Why are they telling it? And when are they telling it? And I always knew the point of view was sort of a narrator, but I had imagined it as a short little book all set in a hotel bar, a picture book, all in the hotel bar. And it kind of snowballed from there. I'm not a good picture book writer. And so it took me a long time. And by the time I was done, my agent, every writer has an agent, said to me, "You've written a fantasy." And I got really offended because I don't like fantasy. And I said, "No, I haven't." And she said, "Well, one of your main characters is a dragon. So yes, you have." And so that was a little embarrassing that I didn't know that. I want to start with questions because I think that helps shape what I'm going to say. I could blather on about writing for hours and then you would all be definitely wanting to sleep. I think it was Christian who wanted to sleep. So Chloe, do you want to tell me your question? And does anybody else have questions about writing before I get started on what I think you should think about? Chloe's typing and Andrew's typing. Okay. Sorry about this, you guys. I just think it's important that we get questions.
Chloe, I can't remember if you're the one that told me that your mic is not working, but do you want me to go ahead and unmute you? That's easier.
Okay, well, that's all right. If you just want to type your question, I can answer it. What exactly are you guys going to be focusing on in your writing quarter? Do you know yet? And if your teacher wants to jump in, that's fine.
So the original idea is that we were going to do a creative writing unit.
Okay.
So one of the possibilities, and they don't know this yet, was an alternative ending for the novel.
I love that.
Yes. So, because that was a bit of a debate amongst the teachers, and had we not had the opportunity to interview you today, we would have had our next book chat because they're finishing the book this week.
Mm-hmm.
So that was on the table for discussion this week, essentially. Because it was definitely a big discussion for the adults who read the book.
Chloe, that is such a good question, and it is a big debate in the writing community. Do you plan it or do you wing it? And like what we call that is, are you a pantser, meaning somebody who goes by the seat of her pants, or do you do an outline? And I always knew, you guys have finished the book, right? I can't do a spoiler, can I?
You can spoil it for us. We're good.
Okay. So I always knew that at the end, Maggie would have to give up the thing she loved most, because I firmly believe my life philosophy is that if you really want something, it's going to cost you. And I think kids get that in a way that grown-ups forget. So I knew the end, but I had no idea how I was going to get there. And at first I thought it was like a lovely little picture book about friendship, and then it kind of kept growing and growing and growing. And an earlier draft, Maggie had a mother who was a banker, so that changed. So I'm a definite winger. I don't recommend it when you start. What I recommend when you start is focusing on tools. What year did you start writing? I don't even remember. I think probably I started it in 2012. Yeah, and it came out in 2018, and it was done by, what's 12 and 5, you guys? Yeah, it was done by 2017. And so that's that. The idea of doing an alternate ending is terrific. The way that I first knew I wanted to be a writer is when I was about your age, maybe in 7th grade, so a year older. Have you guys read To Kill a Mockingbird yet? Yes, no, anybody type? No, okay. So it's told from the point of view of a young girl named Scout, but it's told from Scout's point of view when she's much older. So there's this wonderful stuff going on with point of view. So Scout is, say, somebody as old as I am, but she's writing about her 9-year-old self. So she's talking over her 9-year-old self to the reader, and it's phenomenal. And point of view is just very important. And when I was in 7th grade, I had to rewrite a chapter from another point of view, and I rewrote it from Scout's older brother's point of view. And it taught me so much about writing. So I highly recommend you guys take any text. It doesn't have to be my book, but any book, and mess around with the point of view. So if you do an alternate ending, you guys might want to write the ending from Grisha's point of view. What does it feel like to be a dragon down underneath the earth, watching all of your friends come to life and realize that your best friend can no longer see you? Like, what's that like? That might be a way to you to do it. Or do it from the point of view of Thisbe, who's the last cat standing. What does she do? You know, what happens to her? So that might be a fun thing for you to do. So when you come to writing, there are 2 things I would really ask you to keep in mind both as readers and as writers, and that is point of view, which I've talked about a little bit, and detail. Detail is, do you remember playing Legos? I don't know if you remember playing Legos. I loved Legos because I was a super dork, putting them all together. Details are the Legos blocks of writing and reading. So you can tell a good writer if the detail is good, and if you're kind of fuzzy on the detail, the story is probably not going to be great. It's the details that spring to life. What color is her sweater? What does she use? Even if you don't put it into, for example, I never really put in how my characters brush their teeth because it's boring, but I know it. Those details are really important. They help bring things to life. So when you're reading, it's very helpful to figure out to yourself, what point of view is this about? Why? And what are the details in this book that work for me? One thing I do with my graduate students and my third graders when they're reading, when I'm working on reading with third graders, is I say, go through the book, find me 3 details you like and 3 details you hate. It's just training your eyes to look for details. And then you want that as a writer too. So does anybody have any questions about writers? I love that you guys like Legos. Yay, me too. Writing is like building, and your reading skills are like reading. There were some questions up here about writing and the book, and how did I come up with the characters? That's a good question, and one I get all the time. That's Christian's question, Christian Rodriguez. Well, so my father grew up in Vienna. He had to leave when he was a little boy because the Nazis came in. And we would go back to Vienna all the time because after the war, he and his parents went back. And he used to tell us a story about a dragon who lived in a castle in the Danube. And the story was terrifying, you guys. None of my sisters and I can sleep now. Like, we have all trouble sleeping because this was our bedtime story. And when I saw this teapot in a junk store that was a dragon in the shape of a teapot, I thought, oh, I want to write about that dragon. And I called my father and I said, hey, I want that dragon. Can I have that dragon and write a book about it? And he said, absolutely, you can have it. But his dragon was terrifying, and I knew that mine wasn't. And also my dragon was in a teapot, and I had to figure out how to get it out of there. And Maggie came to me because I lived across the street from a woman who had 2 hilarious young girls who were addicted to sugar. And they used to come over to my house and eat cookies. And one of them was very rambunctious and outgoing, and she had red hair, and she was phenomenally funny. And the other one was older and had a long face and very serious, and I never knew what she was thinking as she ate all these cookies. And so I kind of based Maggie on her. Does that answer your question? Oh, yours was how do you come up with characters' names? I'm so sorry, Christian. I don't have any children, but one of my favorite books before the internet kind of exploded was What to Name Your Baby. So whenever my friends came over, they thought I was pregnant. I was like, no, I'm just working. I really find that very helpful. And going on how to name your baby sites. And when you think about your own names, your names mean something. Your parents spent a lot of time on, even if your name is Mary, your parents have a reason for naming you Mary. So you have to do the same thing for your characters' names. Does anybody have any questions, or do you want me just to scroll up through here?
So there's one question in particular that was asked a couple times about whether or not this would become a series, if possible. A couple of kids put that in the chat.
So I think I'm done with it, but never say never. And by the way, that's a great James Bond movie. Sean Connery comes back and makes another movie after swearing up and down that he would never make another one. So maybe rent that during your shelter in place. But never say never. I think I'm done with them, although I knew in my mind that I had left a loophole. I get a lot of kids write me and say, like, the ending is so sad. Why did you do that? That's terrible. I wouldn't give anything up. Why did she do that? In my mind, when Maggie is older, she goes back to London and she tracks down the granddaughter. I think her name is Katya, right? Of the 2 women who grew up with Grisha. And Katya can still see dragons, and they sit together and have tea and cookies. And Maggie talks to Grisha through Katya. So I also thought another good sequel would be did anybody like the dragon Anushka? She was the female dragon who held down held an army at bay. I don't know, maybe you guys didn't, but I liked her, and I thought she would be a pretty cool dragon. Does that answer the question about a sequel? I hope so. Emmanuel wants to know what encouraged me to be an author. So nobody, actually, only my father. My mother wanted me to go to law school. No one will encourage you to be an author. It's a pretty thankless task. It's hard work. Very few people read. The money's not great. But if you love it, there is nothing better in the world than reading and writing, like nothing. And I feel like one of the reasons nobody likes to read anymore is that we teach reading as if it's a job or work. And it's not. It's the greatest pleasure on earth. It's better than ice cream and naps and Lego. It's fantastic. And I just always really loved it. And the idea that I could, you know how when you read a book, it's in front of you, even if it's on your tablet? Here's you, here's the book. And I knew there was somebody behind the book who had written it, and I wanted to be that person. So I spent most of my childhood and my adulthood, my early adulthood here. And I was like, I want to go here. And that's what encouraged me to be an author. I hope that's a good enough answer for you, Emmanuel. Let's see, is there going to be, what year did, okay, I'm seeing a lot of stuff about, my parents did not have a reason for naming me Christian. I go home and ask them, I don't believe you.
I wanted to ask if maybe we should just skip to the student questions, because they're asking the same things that we put in that we typed onto the PowerPoint. Okay.
Please. Did I do enough on writing about detail and point of view? Do you want me to elaborate, or are we okay with that?
Well, if anyone has any specific questions about writing, they can put those in the chat, and then I'll write them down and I'll just pop them in. Is that okay?
Okay, sounds good.
I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to.
Okay, I think I answered that.
There was a lot of curiosity about this one, and I know Leah doesn't want to ask the question out loud because she doesn't have a mic picture. But a lot of kids were curious about how you develop the characters, and I know you touched a little bit on that, but maybe if you could elaborate a little bit more.
We all carry stories in us, and I think even though this is like my 7th or 8th book, and one of the reasons it was so hard to write is that this was the first time doing a middle grade. I had done young adult, and I'd done a picture book. I think we all have an origin story, like where we come from, why we're here, our culture, and my origin story is very Central European. The Hungarians and refugees, all of that is really part of my DNA, my blood. And so I knew these people, like I grew up around these people. Yakov Meringer, who is the person who released Grisha and who spends a lot of time with him, is the kind of person from Central Europe I would have known my whole life. And so I kind of cheated. I knew these people really well. When I don't know people, for example, I wrote a book called Stay With Me about a girl whose father is an Egyptian Jew. And he comes to the United States by way of Paris when all the Jews are thrown out of Egypt in the early 60s. And I didn't really know a lot about that at all. So I did a ton of reading about the Egyptian Jewish experience, which is different than the European Jewish experience. And I mean, somebody was asking me about character names. I think it took me 3 days to come up with my main character's last name, which was based on different things I had read about Egyptian Jews and the ones especially who lived in Alexandria. So reading is your easiest passport to finding out about other people. And that's why it's better than ice cream and Legos and naps. Obviously I had a kind of funny upbringing. My mother's father was a diplomat and they traveled a lot. And my father was a refugee from World War II and is from Central Europe. But in some ways, my upbringing is very limited. I grew up in New York City. I don't know anything about growing up in the Midwest. I went to college in the South, but the truth is I don't know that much about the South, and I know nothing about Florida. So if I wanted to set a story in Florida, I would have to do some serious reading, and I would also probably want to interview people. So that's how I developed the characters. I kind of cheated. I knew these people. For example, Maggie's mother, who was a banker, I didn't know anything about that. So I did a deep dive into banking, which that's like, 50 hours of my life I'll never get back and was useless because I wound up making her different. But it was interesting. Now I know a lot about banking and women. Yay. So that's how. I hope that answers your question, Leah. It's a really good one. Next. You're writing kryptonite. That is a great question. Kryptonite is the thing that, if I remember my Superman, is the thing that harms you, right? Is that correct, Chloe?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly. And when I saw that question, I said, we need to ask her.
No, it's a great question. And this is a teapot I found in the junk store. So glad you guys have it. My writing kryptonite. Okay, so I'm really good at characters. I'm pretty much terrible at plot. I've had to really train myself to remember that I mean, in many, many ways, I believe story comes from character. If you look at your own lives, at the stories of your life or the story of your day, it comes from the kind of person you are. Like if you're a very easygoing person, probably you didn't start the day by fighting with your brother over the cereal. But if you're kind of wake up cranky and the night before your parents took something away from you, probably you started the day a little cranky and maybe you got into a fight with a sibling or your best friend. So story does come from who we are, but I find that I frequently wind up staring into space, banging my head into the wall when I don't know what's going to happen next. And I have learned the hard way that you can keep going, and I'm not telling you guys not to do your work. You can keep going, but you might not find out as much as if you just stop, take a deep breath, maybe walk around the block, maybe read 2 pages in one of your favorite books, maybe stand on your head, maybe fold laundry, and then go back to it. And that might have cleared your brain a little for you to figure out what happened. I'm not sure if that answers you, Chloe, but I hope it does. It's a great question. Yes, of course I was. Yes, the Holocaust is always on my mind a little bit. I'm one of those lucky people whose family got out. I have cousins who were not lucky. My father's family had 2 passes out of Vienna, and they went to London, and then they went to the United States. And I have cousins whose parents stayed like hiding in Vienna and Poland. So yes, and I also think it's so interesting. I don't know if you guys follow political events, and I don't mean to get sidetracked, but do you remember when we took all the kids away, when the American policy was to take all the kids away from their parents at the border? Like, I feel like the story of displaced people and refugees has never gone away. And I think it's very important that we never forget how lucky we are that we have a home and how brave it is to be a refugee. I have a really, really good friend who lives in DC, and she grew up in Kyrgyzstan. And she married my cousin, one of my 3rd cousins. And she came to this country with no English, and she left her culture. Turns out her mother wound up following her some years later, but she didn't know that was going to be the case. It takes tremendous bravery to be a refugee. And I feel like, obviously, you can't compare the Holocaust to anything, but we as a people are very unkind. And the net result is always that, suffering happens. That was a really long answer, and I did not mean to get into the weeds, Sebastian. You're probably thinking like, oh gosh, I'm sorry I asked that. But yes, I was referencing the Holocaust for sure.
I also unmuted Sebastian because I know he has a part 2 to his question that he put on the chat.
Terrific. Hi.
So Sebastian, if you want to unlock your mic, you can ask it verbally. All right, Sebastian, I'm going to just read it out loud, if that's okay. It says he also wanted to know how Grisha was guilty about survivor's guilt. How Grisha was guilty like survivor's guilt. Sorry.
Oh.
If you could elaborate on survivor's guilt.
Yeah, I think, he's aware. Look, he lost a lot of his life because of Leopold. So he had his own suffering, but he was set free. So when he remembers about the buried dragons, he feels terrible because he's forgotten about it, and he feels that he should have known more than the others. He should have kept that suffering in mind because he knows what it's like to have your life taken away. And I modeled his response a little bit on, at some point in high school, you guys will read a book, I think, called Night by a man named Elie Wiesel, who is probably one of the most famous Holocaust survivors. And he gave an interview once where after he got, his parents died, everything, you know, every horrible thing that can happen happened, but he did survive Auschwitz. And he went to India to see if he could go there and get rid of his grief. And at the time, India was not an economic powerhouse, and there were all of this poverty. You basically had to step over people just to get through the street. And he left and went back to Europe because he said he could not let himself ignore the suffering of others. And that was the only way to survive India. And I've had friends who live in India tell me that that is actually the case. You just kind of got to put your blinders on. And I remember in New York City in the 80s, I would volunteer at homeless shelters just because that would allow me to put my blinders on during the day because there was so much suffering in the 80s in the city. And I would say, okay, you're not paying attention now, but you will pay attention when you get to the shelter. And I feel like Grisha is most guilty about having ignored and stepped over other dragon sufferings. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's the best I have right now. Will you ask him if that's a good enough answer?
Oh, he says his mic is working now.
Oh, do you want to follow up, Sebastian?
Sebastian, do you want to say hi at least?
Yes.
Oh, there he is.
Hi.
Sebastian, I think you're having some issues. Okay, buddy, we're going to move on to the next question. Okay, if you want to type something, put it in the chat. Okay, we're going to move on. So this question's coming from Quirox, and no microphone picture, so she didn't want to ask the question, or they didn't want to ask the question. I'm sorry.
Okay. Quirox. I really think it was a combination of seeing that teapot and looking at it and asking the teapot, asking the dragon in the teapot, how did you get there? And the dragon saying back to me, or the teapot saying back to me in that way that sometimes objects will talk to you. Well, take me home and maybe I'll tell you. But I don't think that I would have been interested in a dragon teapot if it hadn't been for the story my father told me when I was little, and told both my sisters and me about this fiery, aggressive warrior dragon who lived on the Danube in a castle. So it was that. I was also interested in the way children form friendships. And I'm very, very interested to this day, and I have been my whole life. I just couldn't figure out how to write about it until this book. I believe magic still exists in the world. I don't mean like hocus pocus and spells, but I do think there is magic in the world, and that we don't pay enough attention to it. And that those spectacular moments in life, the ice cream moments, that's when our magic shows up. And that if we look for it and we're willing to pay the price, we can use magic to great effect. So all three of those inspired the idea. That's a great name, by the way, Weyr. It's great. If I pronounced that badly, I'm sorry.
And I think Sebastian actually is piggybacking on this question, or what you just said, because he's asking, my question was, do you think that magic will come back as we're finding things that we can't explain?
Yes, scientists, really good scientists will tell you that they believe in magic and God because they know for sure there are things we can't explain. But I also think magic comes back, and this is why I think it's really important and wonderful you guys are doing a writing section. Magic comes to you the more you pay attention. And details and point of view and other tools that you will learn as writers are all ways of paying attention. And that, yes, I believe, I mean, the science is out there that says magic exists, you know, and that there are things we simply cannot explain. And that is where magic is. But I also think magic is in all the places that we don't necessarily pay enough attention to. And if you slow down and you really pay attention, which is what good reading will help you learn to do, and writing, then you get to see more magic. I hope that answers it.
I think it does. Our next question is coming from Agustina. And the question is, she wants to ask this question herself. So maybe she wants to elaborate. So Agustina, you have been unlocked. So if you want to unlock your mic, you can.
Hi, Agustina.
And students, just so you know, I'm trying to look ahead at the PowerPoint. So if you know you asked a question, I'm going to probably start trying to unlock you earlier.
It might be that Agustina is having microphone problems.
All right, Agustina, if you're ready, you can jump in, but I'm going to ask your question for you. Will there be a second book? Actually, I think you already asked this question or answered this question.
Just as I think either I'll write a book about grown-up Maggie and Katya talking to Grisha, like sort of doing a runaround. But someday maybe I'll write a book about Anushka, the dragon who held an army.
So you make like another book type of the language of spells?
If I decide, the people who really interest me are not the dragons, although Anushka's a pretty cool dragon. The people who really interest me are the magical cats. Like I would love to do a book about Thisbe and Tyr and how they were kitchen girls in a castle, and they made a bad bargain with Leopold. You know, they gave up some stuff to become magical. And I had 6 sections cut it. So if I were to write a book, like a book I was excited about would be about the magical cats. And I had started it a little bit about kitchen maids in a castle, but it got bogged down in the weeds and I had to put it aside for a bit, and now I'm working on something else. But I am really interested in magical cats, for sure. So I think that answers you. I'm not sure. But it's a good question, Agustina.
Thank you. So we are going on to our next question. And it was 2 very similar questions, so we put them on the same slide. And I did activate the mics for both Arush and for Andrew. So if they wanted to ask something, they could. They have been unlocked. But the first question was, what years does this book take place? And this was a really, really, really big debate at our last book chat last week. So, and I think we're talking more about when Grisha and Maggie meet, if you could discuss that.
So I think I did the math on this. I'm pretty sure that it is pre the wall coming down in Berlin. So it would have been, so it's pre-computer, but it also might have been the early 90s when the Bosnian War happened. There was a country called Yugoslavia. They had a huge war that was very terrifyingly reminiscent of the genocide in Germany. They rounded up all the Muslims and they put them in camps and they shot them, and it was horrific. And it was nationalism, it was very ugly. But I think in my mind when I did the math, because it was 30 years since World War II, and Maggie's father had been, in my mind, this is one of those details that I knew that didn't necessarily get into the book. He had been a Czechoslovakian refugee during World War II. So I'm pretty sure it's late 80s or early 90s. And the only significance of that is that at the time, we were saying in the United States that this was the end of history. And even at the time, I was like, history doesn't really end. Stories just keep happening. And so I was interested in that. And I also think the internet has really made storytelling less interesting, because you can always look stuff up, you know? And I like the idea of them having to travel. And so that's a significance. Also, the wall coming down in Berlin is sort of the last chapter of World War II, and so I would have been interested in that. So I think does that answer your questions, guys? It's good questions. It means you're paying attention. So maybe you'll grow up and be future writers. Good detail. Good eyes.
Yeah, big debate. Some of the teachers disagreed, but I am
Okay.
glad that Andrew and I are on the winning side here. So.
Well, here's the other thing I want to say about that. I believe that as many different people read your book, that's how many different versions get read. Like, my mom does not like an ambiguous ending at all. So in her mind, this spell will wear off and Maggie will be able to see Grisha again. So if somebody else thought it took place at a different time and they can back it up with detail, then that's when it took place for them. So I believe that stories are, like, I remember there's a very famous poem you guys will read in college by T.S. Eliot called The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. So I took the title literally. I have read that poem. I have memorized that poem. I have lived with that poem. In my mind, that poem was a love story. So come to find out in graduate school that is not a love story, that poem. That is not what it is about. And I understand why I'm wrong, but my version of the poem is a love story. So if your version of this book took place at another time, I'm fine with that. But kudos, Andrew.
All right, so our next question is coming from Anton, and I told him in the chat to unlock himself. Oh, and there he is.
Hi. Hello.
Hi. Hi, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm pretty okay, and I'm embarrassed to say I can pronounce, this is how I think it's pronounced. Remember, I'm dyslexic, so I may mess this up.
Yeah.
Benevolentia gaudium.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's how I thought it was.
Okay. Names always have special meaning to me. At the time that I was writing this, I had a friend whose son was just heading into college, and she was talking to him about dragons. And he said, oh, everybody knows that dragons need 2 names. And it was just some boy rule. And I was like, okay. And let's make them Latin. And I looked up these words and I knew what they meant. And I think it's benevolence. And I knew at the time, and I'm embarrassed to say I no longer know what those words mean. But yes, all words have, the little girl I told you about that I based Maggie on, her name was Maggie, but it was Marguerite Anna. But that's like an easy one. Normally I would have, spent 50, hours doing trying to figure out names. Grisha is a diminutive for Grigor in Russian. And
yeah, so I have a friend named Grisha.
Okay. And is his family Russian?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I've always loved that particular set of names. Russian names are great. One of my sisters is named Sasha. And
that's my sister's name.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah.
My parents named my sister, wait for it, Lydia Alexandra Helene, just so that they could call her Sasha, because Sasha is a diminutive for Alexandra.
Exactly. That my sister's name is Alexandra, and we call her Sasha.
Yeah, right. And I always thought to my parents, like, you gave her 3 names so we could call her Sasha? Why not just name her Sasha? But anyway, I always love that stuff. So yeah, names. And also, think about it, guys. My name is Garret, and I'm a 5'10" woman, and people are always expecting to meet a man. So yeah, names have special significance to me. I think about them pretty hard. And you, Anton, are named after a famous playwright. Well, maybe not,
I'm not sure.
But...
my mom actually really liked the actor Antonio Banderas.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Then after a famous Spanish actor.
Yeah.
But you can say, if you want, if you grow up to be a playwright, you can say you are named after Anton Chekhov.
Thank you.
So, cool.
Thank you for answering my question.
Of course.
Thank you, Anton. So our next student, I wasn't sure if he wanted to ask out loud, but I did activate his mic, is Rajko.
That is a great question.
If dragons are still alive today, where would they be now?
Does he want to ask me, or do you want me to answer?
Oh, he's saying his mic isn't working.
Okay. That's a great question. I wonder if they would be in Syria. The dragons in my book, I feel, are always someplace where they are least wanted and where they will have the most trouble. I like to think that the dragons in my book were able to find a way to stay in Vienna and all lived happily ever after. But we all know that for people who are, for any kind of community that's unwanted or fragile or vulnerable, they're always on the move looking for places. And maybe they kept moving and they couldn't find a home in Vienna. It's more realistic to think that they wound up either in Syria or, I don't really want to sit here and in the middle of a pandemic list all the greatest hits of the sad places in the world. Maybe they stayed in Vienna. I hope they did. Every time I go to Vienna, I look for them. And I find them on my favorite streets, and I find them in this park called Stadtpark where there are peacocks. I find them any place that there is incredible, excessive beauty in that city. But maybe some of them wound up in Syria or in, at this point, maybe they wound up here in America and they are like working on a cure for the COVID. Or maybe they're in Wuhan in China, frantically working on a cure. I don't know. But it's a great question. I would be more interested in finding out where he thinks they are. Is it possible to ask?
Yes, if he wants to ask, he can. He can type it in the chat.
Yeah,
all right, so our next question, by the way, is going to be from Christian. So if he wants to start unlocking his mic, just unlocked him. But we have another question in the chat. It says, what if dragons are real, but like Maggie and everybody else, we can't see them?
I think for sure they're real. And that's what I would say is learn how to pay attention, learn to look for details, learn to slow down, because dragons take lots of different shapes. I suspect that there are dragons and we're just not paying attention. Grisha is very much based on my dog, Henry. And I think that in a previous life, Henry had been a dragon, like a really sweet, fierce soul. And I think that dragons aren't the only symbols of magic. So just keep paying attention.
Okay, so we're going to move on to Christian's question. And he said he wanted to add his camera. So he wants to say hi as well.
Terrific. While he's doing that, can I go get the plug for my computer? I just realized I'm on 13%. Is it okay?
Of course, go for it.
Okay, right back. I'll be right back, Christian. Hold on. Oi.
Hey, Christian. How you doing, buddy?
Good.
Oh, good. We
I'm
can
doing
hear
good.
you. Guys, by the way, I'm so sorry. Every time I mispronounce your names, I'm so excited to see you guys when we get back in 7th grade.
Hey, you guys, hold on. I'm just plugging in. Technology is not something I do really well.
And Samuel, that's a really good question. I'm going to write it down so that we can ask her.
Okay. Shoot, Christian. Hi. It is so nice to see your face. Hello.
Hello.
Christian, you going to read your question or you want me to read it for you, buddy?
I'm going to read it.
Okie dokie. I'm going to turn off my mic.
If someone takes a picture of Grisha, will everyone see him in the photo? Was my question.
I don't know, and it is a great question. Here's what I think. I mean, just thinking off the top, it is a great question. Do you know that photography has a long history with magic? For a long time, the Roma gypsies who started in Central Europe, that's like where they traced their tribe, believed that if you took their picture, you took a piece of their soul. So you are asking a really great question. There is a relationship between magic and photography. So
is that how some cameras are able to see pictures of ghosts as well? Because of seeing some of the soul?
I don't know. And I don't know very much about cameras that can see ghosts. So I can't really answer that. But gosh, this is a great question. I would imagine that if Maggie, when she could see dragons, took a picture, she could see it. But if she showed it to, say, somebody else who didn't see dragons, her father would see them. But if she showed them to somebody else who didn't see dragons, they wouldn't. Does that answer you?
Yeah, and I also have another question.
Okay.
Why, out of all the places in the world, why did you choose Rome to be where Tyre could be hiding?
Well, okay, so Rome is pretty famous, or used to be back in the day when I was a kid, for having a crazy amount of cats. I mean, crazy. Like, you know how there are pigeons in every city? So in Rome, there are just tons and tons of cats. When I went to Cuba a couple of years ago, it was like being in Rome. There was so many stray cats and dogs. I mean, there are actually more stray dogs and cats, but Rome used to have a huge number of cats. And I thought you'd hide in plain sight if you were a cat looking to hide. That's why. The second part of your question is exactly how do the dragons help the tourists in Vienna? I felt that the tourists who come to Vienna come to see dragons. Like, you know, when you're on holiday, you slow down a little and you feel calmer and you're more relaxed and you have time to pay attention. So I know I keep saying this over and over again, but paying attention is related to magic. So that's how. Does that answer you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would just think that if you're trying to hide, wouldn't you be away from the crowd?
No, I think if you were a cat trying to hide, you would. It turns out that Tyre is not in Rome. But that was Maggie's way of thinking, was like, where would I go? I would go where all the cats were. I would hide in plain sight. I would hide as part of the crowd. I would blend in with the crowd. There's a movie called The Fugitive with Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones. And the way the character gets away and hides is he disappears into a parade. And there's a crowd of people, and there's so many people you can't pick out individuals. So he hides in a crowd. That was my thinking. But your questions are good.
And Fugitive, by the way, is one of my favorite movies. So.
Isn't it fun? I know. Bring me a donut. I love that movie.
All right, so we're going to move on. Our next question is coming from Ishan and Miss LeBron. They both had this question. And Ishan, I activated your mic if you want to jump on.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right. First of all, it's a pleasure to meet you. And I thought this was an amazing experience. So, on to my question. Is it genetics that determine who can see magic? Because when Grisha was in a teapot, Yakov could see Grisha because of the magic potion he took. And we were Ella, who was like kind of like protecting Grisha, or like it showed like a clue that she knew the presence of Grisha, whereas Rachel was like confused and more serious, like she didn't know the presence of Grisha. Is that because of genetics? Because when they visit, when Grisha visits Ella and Rachel later on when they're older, Ella can see Grisha but Rachel can't. So is it genetics from Yakov that passed on to, like, is it gene from Yakov that passed on to Ella so she could see Grisha, or is it just how it is?
I thought that it was both. Not genetic exactly, but you know how there's that whole argument in science about nature versus nurture? Like some of it is genetic and some of it is that you're trained. Like Maggie's father is a poet, and poets are by nature people who pay attention. And they, like when you read poetry, the world slows down. Like when you guys do creative writing, you'll probably read some poetry because poetry is a great teacher for detail. And so some of it was genetic. Her father could see magic, so she could too, but some of it was the way he was raising her. He was raising her to pay attention to what she liked, to read a lot, to ask questions. And my feeling was that both Ella and Rachel had been raised in a way that would allow them to see magic if they chose, but that they, the lives that they led are what led them to Remember, their mother was a piano player. And if I remember correctly, Ella is the one who winds up as the pianist. Is that right? Or is she the doctor? I can't remember. God forgive me.
I kind of mix up the two most of the time.
Yeah, you do a great job keeping them separate. Clearly,
I think Rachel becomes a doctor and Ella becomes the pianist.
That's what I think. I think I might have been making a commentary, although I might have easily switched it because I don't necessarily think it's a job. Like, I think there are great teachers, or teachers actually are natural born poets because they are interested in how minds think and how people learn.
That makes sense. It's kind of like the way they're raised and how their brains think. Like how they mentioned that Rachel couldn't see Grisha in the book, I think. It said something about doctors see things the way they are, not like imagination and stuff. So that's probably how. And also had another question off the top of my head. And it was that, how is Maggie's father, Alexander, related to magic? Because Alexander, he could see Grisha, definitely. And Maggie, or it was mentioned in the book about Alexander knowing magic. So, like, how is he connected to magic? Is he like Yakov and takes a potion?
No, I felt that he had two things going for him that helped. He was a refugee. And I think people who have lost their homes and have to start all over again with language and culture and connection are more likely to see the unusual. It's just like when I started studying Italian, and I noticed that the Italian women I knew who are older were much easier about the aging process than American women. And I was studying the language, and I realized it's that in Italian, we say, I have my years. You know, how many years do you have? We don't say, how old are you? We say, quanti anni ha? How many years do you have? So Italian women own their years. There's power. And because I was not a native-born speaker, I could sort of see like, oh, these women are so easy with their age, and it's the language. So I think refugees are people who are strangers are much more likely to notice things. And the other thing Alexander had going for him is that he was a poet. And I think poets see magic everywhere. And when you start reading poetry, you will think the same. So that's
actually a very good logical explanation, and I never thought of that. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you for being a reader and spending time with Maggie and Grisha. I know they enjoyed their time with you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next question is coming from Niathi, and I already unmuted her. Oh, there she is.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. Hi.
Hello, it's so nice to meet you. I'm happy
You too,
to
my
be
dear. I'm
So,
very happy.
my question was, what can be there? So, I was asking what inspired you. What inspired you with the fact that you must realize what can be there rather than what is there in order to know the infinite amount of possibilities that let you imagine something beyond your imagination? So, meaning that when Ella could see Grisha and Rachel couldn't see Grisha, Ella was saying that doctors, since Rachel was a doctor, she only knew what is there, but since Ella was a pianist, she knew all the possibilities that can be there. So I was wondering what inspired you to develop an idea of imagining something that is beyond what you could truly imagine.
Couple of things. Partly that's my job. Like somebody was asking me, I think it was Chloe, about kryptonite. What is my kryptonite? And I said, it's story. But sometimes my kryptonite is that I go for the easy answer. Like, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And I don't kick myself past what I can imagine. And I have to do that. I'm writing now something I've never written before, and it's really hard, and I have no experience in it. And I'm constantly having to kick myself past what I think I can know. And it's what you guys will encounter. Some of you will encounter it in advanced math. Some of you guys will read the poetry and be like, Garret was right. I'm having to kick myself every day past what I think I can do because I hate poetry. But some of you will be like, this is easy. I just can't stand science or whatever. Every one of us has something we have to kick ourselves past. So that's what did that. And I also felt that when it comes to seeing refugees and suffering and magic and detail, all of us have to step beyond what we can imagine to see what's there. And the other part of it is that I'm a little bit tone deaf, like a lot of people who are dyslexic. But I love classical music. I mean, love it, even though I don't understand what I'm hearing and I can't pick things out very well. And really good classical music by like Bach or Chopin is all about variation. And so if you're a good musician, I don't know if you play a piano or a
Yes,
instrument.
I play the piano.
Okay, so then you know better than I do. It's all about possibility. You could do it in B minor or maybe A flat, or you could do it and there are all these variations. So that was the second part.
Thank you for answering my question. Yes.
Of course. Thank you for asking and thank you for being a reader. I'm thrilled with your question. And keep practicing the piano. I think that's probably the best training to being a good writer.
Yes, thank you.
So, Miss Garret, we have 2 questions. One was from the chat, and it's from Sam, and he wants to know if a movie is going to be published related to this book. Any movie deals?
When I first came out to California, my book agent, had partnered with a fancy agent in William Morris. And she loved the book, and she was like, oh, it's 4-quadrant, and which means like everybody would like to read. It's a family thing. It's great. I'm going to send it out to all these important people, which was great. And she had some producer want it, and then the producer was like, no, actually, we have a property like this. So she took me to lunch to sort of apologize for having said that somebody liked something that they changed it back on. So the answer is no, but the other part of the answer is that although so far no, I did get to go to lunch at an office in Beverly Hills. And my sister came over and did my hair, which, as you can see, has its own personality and mind. And she got some magic potions and a blow dryer, and I had straight, shiny hair. And I went to a fancy office in Beverly Hills, and I met the agent. So no movie, but I did get a fancy lunch.
Fancy lunch and a really good story out of that.
The agent was hilarious. I mean, perfect looking. It was just so hilarious.
So it is 1:59, and there's just, I think, one question left. And I think it's just my question.
Okay.
But I don't know if you want to take any other questions from the chat or anything like that. But my biggest question was, obviously you're a writer, telling stories is your job, but a big theme in this particular story is the importance of I guess transferring on your story to other people or sharing stories, like that idea. If you could elaborate, why is that important?
Why is it important to tell our stories? Is that the question? I think
yes.
Well, I just feel that they're important, but I have some good reasons. I have evidence to back me up on this. So there's a very famous, I think his name was Houston Phillips or Houston somebody. I would Google it. He was a religion scholar. And he said that every great religion, Catholicism, Hinduism, Muslim, evangelical Christianity, Buddhism, all of them have origin questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going? And that all important philosophical and religious traditions answer those questions. And I think that we each individually have those questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going? And that's why we tell our stories, so that we can tell other people, because that's how we connect. I know where I came from. I came from strange refugees from Central Europe and the daughter of a diplomat. That's my origin story. The answer of why am I here changes from day to day. And I hope I know where I'm going, but I meet people and I want to know where they're from, because that's how I know who they are, and that's how we can come together and share. I used to teach English as a second language. And my very best students, I met in the basement of a church. They were all grown-ups, and they'd all come here with no English. And I would teach them enough so that they could tell me a little bit about where they were from, why they were here. And it was the most exciting time in my life. They were the best students I've ever had in my life. They were the bravest, and they were the most forgiving, because I wasn't always great at it. It's really hard to teach English. But the way we connected, even though I certainly didn't speak Spanish or French or Bengali. Oh my God, the ladies from Bengali were hilarious and never stopped talking. Boy, there's nothing like being a young woman in a classroom telling older ladies to stop talking. You really get some humility. So your stories matter because they're why you're here. And until you answer those questions and until you tell your story, you may not know why you're here, and you may not know where you're going. And you may not know your friends really well until you let them answer those questions. And you should ask your parents, and you should ask your teachers. And our stories matter because they explain why we're here. I'm super evangelical and annoying and passionate about that. I think it's so important. Does that answer it, or is that just a lecture?
I love the answer. I think it's fantastic. So, and we have one more question, and this is our last one. I'm so sorry. This is coming from Cameron. Oh, there she is. Good.
Hi.
My computer is procrastinating.
I'm sorry, what?
My computer is procrastinating.
Yeah, they do that. What's your question, sweetie?
Okay, can you give us more background on Leopold?
Leopold Vukovics?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he's the great tragic figure of the book, because he is what, like, the dragons all adapt to life post-magic, and the magical cats all figure out how to live. But Leopold can't figure it out, and Leopold has given away his whole life, everything he loves and holds dear, in order to keep practicing. So instead of getting joy out of that, he is really bitter. And so he has access to magic. He has made magic his whole life. The world has moved past him. And instead of adapting to no longer being the center of the universe, he's bitter about it. And I always felt that if the thing he had given up was love, which makes me sound like I'm from the 60s, and I'm not. I'm old, but not that old. He would have been a happier person, but the thing he had to give up was money. And you will find that people who love money, when they have to give it up, are super angry people. But people who give up love, because that's what matters most to them, these are the best people. So when you meet people in your life who find money very important, run. When you meet people in your life who think that the most important thing you can do is to love your friends, stay with them. Hi, I see you now. Hi. Does that answer your question about Leopold?
Yeah.
Did you want more about, like, who his parents were or something? Or was that it?
No. I just wanted to know why he was so evil.
Yeah, I think he's really unhappy. Don't you find that in your own life, that people who are mean are really unhappy people? In my experience, which might be different from yours, but in my experience, the nastiest people are the unhappiest.
I think that's something we learn as we get a little bit older.
Well, I am old, so that would make some sense.
I'm probably the same age.
Okay. Well, we're of a certain age then. We're not old. We're just of a certain age. So I hope.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. This has been the best hour of my month. I mean, not just May. I mean, this has been the best hour of my lockdown. Thank you. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. And also, Nellie has my email. If you guys have questions about writing as you go along, I am totally happy to take email. Just say, like, I was in the class from Florida. Can you answer this? And I'm happy to do it. Okay?
That is awesome.
Okay,
I think we're definitely going to have some questions.
I'm happy to do it. Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking me. I'm super grateful.
We are grateful to you. We appreciate your time for sharing your time with us.
Did you want to do a picture of all of us or no?
Oh, yes. Can we do a picture? Nellie, can you activate your camera?
Yes, sure I can.
Actually, I'll activate mine.
Allow.
We can
There
pretend
I
it's a group
am.
photo.
Oh,
I know, it's so weird.
did I turn it off? I think I turned off mine.
Oh, it won't let you
Start
activate it?
sharing. No, I turned it off instead of on. There it is.
Hi.
Hi.
Here we go.
Okay.
All right, are we
Can
ready
the
for
kids
group
all
photo?
come in or no?
What happened?
We might try.
Can the kids all
Put
come
all the
in? Or...
kids in.
How do I unlock everyone though? That's what I'm wondering.
The
We still have
general
20
unlock.
people in the room. Lock viewers, create, turn off meeting
There
mute.
is a button where you can unlock everybody.
These are some of the smartest questions I've gotten. I've done a lot of book talks with this book, and this group of young people is extraordinary. I mean, kudos, you guys. You've really done an amazing job with them. They're great.
It's all them. So we
Yeah.
have a unique situation. I am the literacy coach for the school, and Nellie is the media specialist. So we took over the class for this quarter. So
You did a great job. You really did. They're great.
okay, so I'm trying to figure out how to activate everybody, and I'm just finding a whole bunch of other buttons. I'm so sorry, Nellie. I'm sorry, Miss Garret. Save usernames, lock viewers. I can lock people, but I can't unlock everyone.
Oh.
How about meeting mute turned off?
That's working. Okay.
Guys, if anyone's able to unlock their webcam, if you want to be in our picture, you can pop in. But I'm going to take a quick screenshot of the three of us, if that is okay. So give a good cheese, everyone.
Yes.
Hi.
For Instagram, there we go.
Okay.
You need to share it with the two of us so we can put it also.
I already put it on
Oh,
our
there's the
Twitter.
box.
I put
Oh,
it
that's
on
our principal, by the way,
on
Miss
our
Ruth.
Twitter, and I
Hi.
sent it to Dana. Hi, thank you so much
You
for
run a
taking the
really
time.
amazing school, Mrs. Russo.
We appreciate it. This is so exciting. We're gonna definitely we tagged you in our post, and we're gonna do it on Instagram and Facebook as well. So it was excellent. I was trying to listen in as we were here managing the front office at the same time. So well done, very well done. Thank you. Really, really insightful advice for our young up and coming writers.
Yeah, and I'm quite serious, you two who are running the class, if they want.
I think you muted everybody, Esteval.
I'm so sorry. Should all be unmuted. I apologize. Did I mute her?
Yeah, it was everybody. Yeah, she's still muted.
How do I unmute?
You just click on her and unmute her.
Here we go. I'm sorry.
I'm unmuted. Thank you so much.
Good job. Good job. Thank you. Thank you all. Very exciting.
We appreciate it. We really do.
My pleasure. Thank you again for having me, and happy Friday, everybody.
Same to you.
Happy Friday to you. Enjoy your weekend.
Bye, ladies.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Mr. Sibyl, remember to stop the record.
Yes, I'm stopping it right now.
Stop the